Nobody saw this coming. The Detroit Pistons, a franchise that suffered through the longest losing streak in NBA history just 2 seasons ago, are now the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. The same team everyone wrote off as a rebuilding project is dominating the league. The same player critics called a bust is now a legitimate MVP candidate. This isn't a fluke. This is the result of patience, persistence, and one man's unshakable calm in the face of chaos. For over 2 decades, Detroit fans watched their beloved team crumble. The glory days of the Bad Boys and the 2004 championship felt like ancient history. Hope turned into despair, and despair turned into acceptance that greatness might never return. But something shifted. Something clicked, and at the center of this impossible resurrection stands a 23-year-old from Texas who never raised his voice, never chased the spotlight, and never stopped believing. This is the story of how Cade Cunningham saved Detroit basketball. This video is about the rise of Cade Cunningham, a player who went from being labeled safe and boring to becoming one of the most dominant forces in the NBA. We're diving deep into his journey from a quiet kid in Arlington, Texas, to the face of Detroit's revival. You'll see how he handled pressure that would have broken most players, how he turned doubt into fuel, and how his calm demeanor became his greatest weapon. This isn't just a basketball story. It's a lesson in patience, resilience, and what it truly means to lead. Cade's path wasn't easy. He faced injuries, historic losing streaks, and endless criticism. People questioned his game, his potential, and whether he could ever live up to being the #1 pick. But through it all, he never panicked. He stayed true to who he was, trusted the process, and slowly but surely transformed an entire franchise. Now he's sitting at the top of the MVP race, leading Detroit back to relevance. And the best part? He's doing it his way, with control, composure, and that signature calm that once made people doubt him. Cade Cunningham didn't grow up chasing attention. He grew up in Arlington, Texas, in a household where discipline and preparation mattered more than flash. His father, Keith, played college football, and his mother, Carrie, was a professional tennis player. Winning was important, but the work behind the scenes was what shaped him. From day one, Cade wasn't the loudest kid on the court. He was the smartest. He had a feel for the game that couldn't be taught, an instinct that made him stand out without ever needing to force it. As a kid, Cade didn't just play basketball. He played football too, learning how to read the field, stay calm under pressure, and think 2 steps ahead. That quarterback mindset stuck with him forever. Competition was constant in his household. His older brother Cannon never took it easy on him, turning every backyard game into a war. That grind made Cade tougher, sharper, and more disciplined. By the time he reached high school, that calm energy was already his trademark. People called him boring, but those who really knew basketball saw something different. They saw a kid who was leveling up mentally and physically, building a foundation that would carry him to greatness. At just 16 years old, Cade made a decision that would change his life forever. He left his family, his friends, and everything familiar behind to join Montverde Academy in Florida. This wasn't just a high school, it was a basketball factory where only the toughest and most locked-in players survived. Cade traveled over 1,000 miles to step into a program that felt more like college than anything else. Childhood was over. Now it was all about proving he could hang with the best players in the country. Montverde was brutal in the best way. Every practice was a battle. Every game was a test. Cade didn't walk in as the star. He joined a locker room stacked with 5-star recruits who were used to being the guy. But his calm and control stood out fast. Bigger defenders couldn't rattle him. Faster guards couldn't speed him up. Before long, coaches trusted him to run the floor like a professional. By his junior and senior years, the team was loaded with future NBA names like Scotty Barnes. Yet Cade was the glue. He led with control, not noise, turning Montverde into one of the most dominant high school teams ever. He left undefeated, sharper, calmer, and fully aware that every move now carried real weight. Just when Cade started finding his rhythm at Montverde, life hit him with challenges most teenagers never face.
Within months of moving to Florida, he experienced deep personal loss, losing loved ones back to back and barely having time to breathe. Then came a life-changing moment that would test his character in ways basketball never could. His ex-girlfriend back in Texas was pregnant, and Cade was just 17 years old, living hundreds of miles away from home. Suddenly, he was facing real-life pressure that most grown men struggle with. He even thought about stepping away from basketball completely to focus on fatherhood, not out of fear, but out of love and responsibility. That's when his parents stepped in. They didn't tell him what to do. They reminded him he could do both, chase his dream and be there for his child. That moment flipped a switch inside him. Cade didn't crack under the pressure. He locked in harder than ever. Basketball didn't lose meaning. It found purpose. From that point on, Montverde wasn't just about hoops anymore. It became real-life training, and Cade was learning how to handle life when it hit hard.
By the 2021 NBA Draft, Cade Cunningham wasn't just another name. He was the name. Scouts called him safe, polished, and high floor, the type of player every team dreams about. Calm, consistent, and ready to lead without drama. When Detroit landed the #1 pick, they didn't think twice. The Pistons didn't draft Cade for flash or noise. They picked him for stability. They needed someone steady, someone who could rebuild a broken system with control and purpose, and Cade fit that perfectly. Still, not everyone agreed. Some scouts leaned toward Evan Mobley's defense. Others hyped Jalen Green's explosiveness or Scotty Barnes's energy. Critics wondered if Cade's calm, methodical game could survive in a league that worshipped speed and highlights. Could he really shine in a world built for chaos? Detroit believed he could, and they were right to bet on it. This wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about restoring identity. Before Cade, the Pistons had lost that edge. They were once the home of the Bad Boys and the 2004 championship team that proved chemistry beats superstardom. Detroit didn't just win back then, they defined toughness. Now it was time to bring that spirit back. Cade's rookie year was steady but not spectacular. He averaged around 17 points, 6 assists, and 5 rebounds, showing flashes of brilliance but no immediate fireworks. Then disaster struck in his second season. A stress fracture in his left shin ended his year after just 12 games. Another brutal pause in a rebuild already hanging by a thread. 2 years in, the questions got louder. Where was the star Detroit was promised? Top picks aren't supposed to disappear, but Cade had, once buried under losses, then sidelined by injury. The 2023-24 season was supposed to be his comeback. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. The Pistons went on the longest losing streak in NBA history, 28 straight games. And through all of it stood Cade, running the offense, setting up teammates, trying to lead a broken roster that couldn't catch a break. After nearly every loss, he stood in front of cameras taking blame that wasn't all his to carry. The front office had spent big money trying to build stability and somehow made the chaos worse. Analysts stopped calling Cade patient and started labeling him passive. Then came the harshest word of all, bust. No context, no nuance, just noise. By the end of that rough stretch, the player once labeled the safest pick in his class was suddenly seen as a disappointment. Then came the 2024-25 season, and things finally started to change. Most people had written Detroit off, but behind the scenes, the pieces started to make sense. The front office stopped chasing hype and started building smart. Tobias Harris came back, bringing leadership and reliable scoring. Malik Beasley added grit and shooting. Tim Hardaway Jr. brought spacing and veteran poise. None of it made big headlines, but that was the beauty of it. Every move had purpose, and for the first time, the Pistons built around Cade instead of just putting him in the middle of chaos. When the new coaching staff arrived, everything shifted. They didn't try to rebuild Detroit's identity, they brought it back. Defense mattered again. Accountability was real. Roles were clear. The results were wild. After winning only 14 games the season before, Detroit tripled that total, one of the biggest turnarounds the league had seen. At the center of it all was Cade Cunningham,
No longer just surviving the chaos, but commanding it. He played 70 games, averaging 26 points, 9 assists, and 6 rebounds. Elite numbers backed by complete control. The league couldn't look away anymore. Cade earned his first All-Star nod and made the All-NBA third team. When MVP ballots dropped, his name was right there, finishing 7th. The player once labeled safe and boring had become a star no one could ignore.
Nobody saw what came next happening this fast. Around the league, the talk was predictable. Detroit will cool off, the magic will fade, the hype will settle. Young teams weren't supposed to rise this quickly, and they definitely weren't supposed to stay there. But Detroit didn't care about that noise. A quarter into the 2025-26 season, the Pistons weren't catching anyone off guard anymore. They were controlling games. They walked into packed, hostile arenas and left with confident, businesslike wins. They dictated pace, controlled energy, and made every matchup play on their terms. Then came the streak that shut everyone up. 13 straight wins, tying a franchise record only reached twice before, and both of those runs ended with banners. Suddenly, the league couldn't deny it anymore. Detroit basketball was back. This squad is cut from the same cloth as the Bad Boys and the 2004 champions. They're winning every type of game, grinding out defensive battles, closing tight ones with poise, and blowing teams out before halftime. Jalen Duren leveled up into a force in the paint. Asar Thompson became one of the nastiest perimeter defenders in the league. Isaiah Stewart and rookie Ron Holland brought that Detroit edge back, all grit, hustle, and zero fear. And at the center of it all, the calm heartbeat keeping it steady, is Cade Cunningham. Cade was never meant to save Detroit overnight. He wasn't built for shortcuts or hype. His story has always been about endurance, carrying pressure, tuning out the noise, and standing tall when everything else falls apart. Now he's sitting firmly in the top 3 of the MVP race, not because of hype, but because he's earned it. Detroit's rise isn't luck, it's Cade's control, composure, and leadership turning belief into reality. He doesn't play like he's trying to convince anyone. He plays like someone who already gets it. Calm, smooth, steady. For the first time in forever, Detroit isn't chasing anyone. The league is chasing them. Detroit fans have lived through heartbreak, false starts, and years of holding on to memories of what their basketball used to mean. But now they're smiling again. Not because trophies are promised, but because this team finally feels real, built right, built to last, led by a player who doesn't need to talk loud to prove he's that guy. Detroit never needed saving, it just needed direction. And the player everyone once called boring didn't just fit in, he took control of the league. That's Cade Cunningham, and that's Detroit basketball. If this story inspired you, smash that like button right now. Drop a comment and tell me what you think about Cade's MVP chances. And hit subscribe because we're just getting started with more deep dives into the stories that matter in the NBA. Let's keep building together.